just gonna leave it.
All right. I'm gonna wait until you guys start coming on. I'm just tagging a few people so that they can get the notifications. Hi Harrison. Hi Summer. Hey Carlzine. Hey Daniel. Hey Sade. Okay, I'm just gonna wait for a few more of you guys to come on. If you guys see me looking over here, it's because I have my laptop over here and I'm like, no, I'm paying attention to what's going on here as well. Hey Ariel. So, hey Glenda. So today, this evening, I'm having the opportunity to be able to speak on a really prevalent topic, a relevant topic that I feel like is affecting the church right now. And it's obviously a Real People Real Lives discussion. I'm not sure if you guys know about Real People Real Lives, but they're basically a group that is basically changing the culture, the conversations that we have in church. And they're doing a really amazing job. If you guys want, you guys can follow them at Real People Real Lives here on Facebook, at RPRL Show on Instagram, and I believe they're on Twitter too. I'm pretty sure. Carldean, would you mind putting the info, like pinning it? Okay, I'm gonna wait for a few more of you guys to come on. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Tammy. Okay, so Carlene just posted it. She said our Instagram and Twitter, RPRL Show, Cash App, where you can send donations. You know, it's RPRL Show as well. They're on YouTube, Real People, Real Lives. Hey, Christopher. And you can follow us on Instagram at RPRL Show so that you can receive the polls that we post before we have our discussions. So before we get started, I'm going to say a word of prayer. It seems like we have a good amount of people here right now. I'm going to say a word of prayer so that we can begin. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us to be able to congregate right now in this very moment. We ask that the conversation, the discussion that we're going to have, that it be pleasing to you, that you fill us with your Holy Spirit, so that the words that's being spoken or any of the things that we are writing comes from you alone. We ask that you allow this to be a fruitful conversation that changes the culture of the way we interact with one another in church. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Hey, Mari. Okay, so can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure you guys hear me. Give me some thumbs up if you hear me. Hi, Val. Give me, like this video, like the video if you're able to hear me. Okay. All right, so you can hear me. So tonight's discussion the question that we have for tonight is the church helping or hurting your relationships? So I know it's a very broad topic, but we had some questions that we asked on Instagram. And you guys had like a lot of feedback. A lot of you guys gave us feedback. And I'm just going to read the questions to you guys and tell you exactly how people voted, what they said in relation to the questions. Just give me one moment. Okay. So one of the first questions that we asked was, how much emphasis do you believe the church places on personal relationships? How much emphasis do you believe the church places on personal relationships? And 63% said none. 37% said a lot. So the majority that's winning here is none. Most people believe that the church does not place emphasis on personal relationships. The next question, do you feel safe and supported enough to speak about your difficulties and or sins you struggle with to anyone in the church? 90% said no, they don't feel comfortable or supported or safe enough to speak about their difficulties and or sins that they struggle with in church. And only 10% said they do feel comfortable or they do feel safe. The next question we asked was, do you feel like the church is preparing you to be married? 17% said yes, and 83% said no. The next question, does the church promote transparency in relationships, friendships, etc.? 87% of people said no, and 13% said yes. We asked people, do they have a mentor from church? 10% said yes, 90% said they do not have a mentor in church. The next question we asked was, when you hear the words transparency, judgment, and accountability in relation to the church or church culture, what comes to your mind? And we had a few responses from you guys. Somebody said, what comes to mind is somebody being banned from church. Another person said, the pressure to be perfect. Someone else said they feel like it's more showing more judgment towards each other instead of showing correction. Another question we asked was, what are ways that the church can help relationships? And these are the responses. One person said couples events and talks and special guests. Another person said, stop making people who are not married feel left out. I feel you on that one. Another response says, talking about the struggles that are faced in relationships. Someone else said, teach that social status is not everything, and stop focusing so much on gender roles. Another person said, have couples talk about real struggles that they deal with. Somebody else said, mentorship, more counseling, roundtable talks, and address hardships in relationships. Another person mentioned seminars addressing the topic. And another person said, be more involved. Don't be so quick. Don't be so quick to a need that has been ignored. Another question we asked everyone was, how can the church help build strong friendships? People said small groups, more social activities, display and teach transparency, more social events, more involvement, and having intentional relationships in every fashion in the first place. I'm almost finishing up with the questions. Another question we asked was, do you have a spiritual accountability partner inside or outside the church? 51% said no, 49% said yes. And those are basically the questions that we asked. So I just want to remind you guys that this is not me preaching. This is not just me, speaking on my own. I want you guys to be very interactive. I want you guys to be involved. I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your own personal experiences, any spiritual or biblical backups that you may have for what we're saying. So be sure to join in, share the live, make sure you're sharing it to all your friends, tag them in it to invite them, and hopefully we're going to have a great discussion tonight. So again, the topic for the night is the church helping or hurting your relationships? Okay? Is the church helping or hurting your relationships? So one of the things we can start with, 90% without a mentor. That's insane. That's what Eric said. I agree. The topic is the church helping or hurting your relationships? Now, obviously, we know there are different types of relationships that we have. There's friendships, there's romantic relationships, there's relationships between parents and child, there's the acquaintances that we may have in church or outside of church. So there's many relationships that we can have outside of the church or inside of the church. So the question is, how does the church help or hurt these things? So I want to touch on a couple of different things. One of the things I know a lot of people mentioned in my DMs when I was sharing the questions was this issue of transparency. This issue of, or lack thereof, I should say, the lack of transparency within the church that hurts the relationships that we have, whether inside the church or outside the church. So I guess the first question that I'd like to ask you guys is, how do you think, transparency or lack thereof in the church can affect the relationships that we have with people inside the church or outside the church. What do you guys believe? Hi, Marielle. How does the lack of transparency within the church, prevent you from having either healthy relationships within the church or, strain the relationships that we have in the church or outside the church? Personally, I believe that, sometimes transparency or the lack thereof can cause people to feel as though they can't be too open. They can't speak about the struggles that they're going through, which is something that a lot of people mentioned in the answers that they were giving to the questions. They said that they felt like they couldn't speak to somebody in church. They couldn't be open about their issues. Okay, someone's asking, what is transparency? Transparency, you can describe that as being open, being a bit honest. I'm going to look up an exact definition for you guys. So it says transparency, the condition of being transparent. And I guess that's kind of like being open, being able to be completely or semi-vulnerable about certain things. So that's what transparency would be, opening up a part of your life, or, being able to open up about situations that you're dealing with. That's what transparency is. So like I was saying before, transparency or the lack thereof in the church can create a strain in personal relationships, because you would think that inside the church, we're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to be a community that supports one another, right? That's what church is supposed to be. Hi, Jilovda. Hey, Stacy. You're supposed to think that, as a community, we're there to build one another up. Even the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. But the thing is, how are we truly able to do that if there's no transparency involved? If we don't know that somebody is dealing with a particular issue or a particular sin, then how can we provide support either as a church community or as different individuals within the church? Sade says, without transparency, you aren't able to have authentic relationships because you won't feel connected. The relationships won't feel real, and there's a false sense of community and connection. Wow, I completely agree with that. I see what you're saying. Hey, Monjulio. Again, Sade said, without transparency, you're not able to have authentic relationships. And that is so true. Because like I was saying before, you would think that we're supposed to be a community. But if you don't feel connected, what really connects one person to another? If you think about the friendships that you build or the romantic relationships that you build with somebody, there's a level of vulnerability that's needed in order to have those relationships flourish, right? There's a level of transparency that you need to have. You guys begin, talking to one another about your likes, your dislikes, things that had happened to you in the past. These are kind of the foundations, or some of the things that create the foundations for our relationships, friendships, or romantic, or whatever it may be. So if there's no transparency in the church, then how healthy can these relationships be? How can we even build these relationships? So Sade, you touched on a great point. Renee says, I believe that within the church, transparency is hard to find because we are to live by the book. We can't speak on our truths and our life's hardships if it doesn't align with the book. Explain to me what you mean by that. Explain to me what you mean by that, Renee. So she says that transparency is hard to find because we are to live by the book. We can't speak on our truths and life's hardship if it doesn't align with the book. So what I'm assuming from what you're saying, what I'm getting from what you're saying is that, we can't speak on the different things that are, that happen to us because it goes against the norm in the church. Let me know if I'm correct with what you're saying. But yeah, I would love for you to explain that. And of course, I'm just reminding you guys that you guys can join the live. If you have anything to say, you can join the live through video and, share your thoughts as well. So what you mentioned, Renee, is a really important point. What is the culture that we create in the church, and what would we consider going against that culture, when it comes to transparency? I would think that, in the church, we've created this culture of everyone, you know, seeming perfect, or everyone having to look the part, everyone having to dress the part. And that prevents us from being transparent. That prevents us from being able to speak about different things. There is a term that they have for that called spiritual pretense. You know, you're in the church and you have to act the specific way. You have to act, you know, you have to carry the specific image around. And if you happen to fall, or if you happen to do something that goes against that image, then is the church really there to support you? Because we have not created that culture within the church. So I think that's a great point that you mentioned, Renee. Evna's saying, hi Mitsuka, it's Christine. Okay, transparency is hard because there are so many different beliefs within this umbrella called Christianity. So first, I believe we have to agree on the scriptures that help guide in our lives to glorify God. I totally agree. As we mentioned that, I just want to bring up one of the scriptures that we're going to be discussing tonight. If you guys know, James 5 verse 16 says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Again, I'm going to say it again. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. So what do you guys think that scripture means? What does it mean to you when it says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed? Let me hear your thoughts. What do you guys think that scripture means? I mean, personally, I would say that, you know, it's literally telling us to be able to be transparent with one another. I believe that's what the scripture is saying. It says, you know, confess to one another, confess your trespasses, to one another. If you've done wrong, you know, be able to be open with somebody about that. But the question here is, how open should we be with one another? Is there safety? Is there a safety net for us to be able to be open? The scripture is James 5 verse 16. That's the scripture. Charlene says she believes that James 5 verse 16 means that you can be transparent with one another. I totally agree. But, okay, Sade's saying being real and having an open dialogue with each other. Absolutely. I totally agree. But you see, the scripture says this. And the question here is, why aren't we acting on it? Why is it so taboo to be able to speak about our issues in church? Why is it so taboo to be able to discuss the things that we're struggling with one another within the walls of the church? Why is that such a taboo thing? Where did this culture come from? Why? Some people may say that it's taboo because, you know, we may, you know, lead others to fall if we're being open with something that we're doing, right? I've heard that many times before, where people are saying, you know, you're in church, but you're doing such and such. And because you're doing that, then that kind of ruins your witness. But, you know, how do we reconcile those two things? You know, I want to hear from you guys. How do you reconcile, you know, ruining your witness, right? Ruining your witness by being open with something that you're struggling with, and trying to be transparent, like, you know, James 5 or 16 tells us to be. I'm going to go to the comments because you guys are responding. Charlene says it depends on who you want to be vulnerable with. I absolutely agree. But what would you mean? Like, who do you think you should be vulnerable with? Do you think it's just a choice, or do you think that there are certain people that, you know, you don't receive the chance to be able to be vulnerable with in church? Let me know. If you want to join the live, you can come on and speak your mind as well. Renee said the church is extremely stuck with the same sins. We have cures for certain sins. So when there's a question about homosexuality or mental health, we as a church don't know what to do. We know how to deal with fornication and smoking and drinking, but when it comes down to expanding our arms and minds to help our brothers and sisters with things we've never dealt with before, we're stuck and refuse to learn how to better the ways of helping and being there for people. Wow, that's a powerful statement. And that is so true. We do think that there are cures for certain sins, but if somebody falls, if somebody's sin or the wrongdoing that they're, engaged in falls outside of those sins that we like to address, then how can we create a safe space within the church for them to be able to come to somebody, to be able to speak to somebody about these things? Legion said it's a lack of trust. I absolutely agree, because as you guys saw in the polls, a lot of people said that they can't go to somebody in their church and be open with them, And I'm pretty sure that comes from a lack of trust. And that lack of trust, I'm pretty sure it comes from some underlying issues that have gone on as well. So if anybody wants to share, why do you think there's a lack of trust? Why do you think, we can't go to somebody in the church and speak about something? Is it for fear of judgment? Is that what it is? Which is one of the other topics that we're going to be discussing later on. Do you think people fear judgment and that's why they're not transparent? Or is it something else? Val said, I think people are afraid of being judged. Yep, I absolutely agree. People are afraid of being judged, which prevents them from being transparent. Tristan said, it could be arrogance or hatreds towards each other. Maybe I could be wrong. No, there's no wrong ideas here. But, elaborate on that for me. You said it could be arrogance or hatreds towards each other. That's what would prevent people from being transparent. Let me hear some more about that. Vier said, in the church, there should be transparency, but if we admit to sinning or falling, we get looked down upon instead of prayed upon. Wow, that's good. I'm going to come back to that. Ricard said, most of us struggle with the same thing, but we are afraid to share because we've been hurt so many times in life. But if we were to share our faults, we would see that we are more alike and would be able to help each other and ourselves. I absolutely agree. And I think this is one of the powerful things about transparency. This is the benefit of being transparent with one another. I feel as though so many people in the church are suffering. So many people are suffering in silence with these things that they're dealing with. And why are they suffering in silence? They think that they're the only ones who comes into contact with the specific sins. They think that they're the only one who has issues with whatever it is that they're trying to get over. And if you think everyone around you is perfect or, perfect, if everyone is engaging in this whole idea of spiritual pretense, then how can we really help one another? So Ricard, what you said is totally, totally true. I absolutely agree. Charlene says, there are certain people that you can trust, but no one is not helping. What do you mean by that? There's certain people you can trust, but no one is not helping. Okay, Stacy said, we cannot be open because it's not safe to talk about what we're going through. Fear of being judged. They will use our vulnerability against us. So everyone's kind of reiterating the same thing. This whole idea that if you're transparent, if you open up to someone, within the church, then either you're going to be judged or they're going to use it against you. And if that's what everyone or the majority of people are believing, then what are we what are we failing to do here? One, clearly the church is, judging people too much, but I also think that we should specify what judging is. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's something called spiritually rebuking somebody, healthy rebuke. How do you differentiate the two? And do you think people are truly afraid of being judged, or are they afraid of rebuke, period? Because sometimes, even the Bible tells us that it's not wrong to rebuke somebody. And I would think that if you have a relationship with somebody in the church, right? If a friend of yours, that they're engaging in something that they shouldn't be doing, of course, we are all sinners. But should that stop you? Should that stop the person from being able to speak to you about what you're doing wrong? And if they do that, is that something that would prevent you from being transparent with them in the future? And if so, why? Are we truly afraid of judgment? Or are we afraid of rebuke, period? Are we afraid of people not agreeing with what we're going through? Because it's one thing to be transparent, but then if somebody calls you out on it and tells you it's wrong, how do you respond? I'm going to go to the comments to see what you guys are saying. Christina said, yes, the culture in church reminds me of the religious leaders that tried to kill Jesus multiple times. It was all about appearance. Pride. Paraphrasing, Jesus said that's all they get, the praises of people, not of God. Charlene said it's in their fear of judgment. Absolutely, which is something that we mentioned before. Renee said it's not taboo. We're just lazy with our love. We're lazy about getting to know and love new people. We're lazy about researching and praying about new things we've never heard or never seen before. Or we're so scared that whatever sin they're engaged in will rub off on us. I've seen people within my own family cut off people without even getting to know them. Why? Because of their sin. How do you love someone without even trying to get to know them? So I'm going to stop right here for a second, because what Renee mentioned kind of brings us back to this whole overarching topic. How does, is a church helping or hurting your relationships? And from what Renee said, it's hurting the relationships. How are you able to build a relationship with somebody? How do you get to know somebody? How do you love them, as their whole selves without transparency being part of the equation? So so from what we're getting here, it seems like more of you are saying that the church is hurting your relationships, right? Sade said, if a person is judging you for being open with others in efforts to help save lives, then I don't believe the person has had a personal encounter, a breaking and reshaping by God. To me, it's a lack of maturity and a sense of ignorance. I agree. Charlene said jealousy. So you believe jealousy may be one of the things that prevents somebody from being transparent? Elaborate on that for me more. Carlene said, it just takes a few people to be blunt and honest about their struggles. Yes, especially leaders in the church. Then from there, people become comfortable. Okay, so what I'm getting from what Carlene is saying is that one of the ways that we can resolve this is if the leaders, the people that, are at the top of the pyramid, if you will, in the church, if they are transparent, if they are able to speak about their own struggles, then everyone else will feel comfortable. Then everyone else will feel comfortable to speak about their own struggles. But why is it that we have to wait for other people? Why is it that we have to wait for, our leaders to be able to be transparent? Because I would think that we all are operating with this mindset that no one's perfect, right? That all of us are sinners. But Carlene makes a great point. So the question I'd like to ask you guys is, do you think if your church leaders were more transparent, were more open with, their congregation about the struggles they're dealing with, would that encourage you to be more transparent? Renee said, real talk, look down upon, get preyed on instead of preyed on. Yep. Tristan said, I'm not sure. Okay. As Christians, we are failing to love one another. Stacy said, I wish more people could be open to talk about this topic. We have to put up a face to go to church. Exactly, which is the issue. Again, I'm saying spiritual pretense. Why do we all have to fall into this category? Why do we have to pretend that, we're all these spiritually fit beings? And of course, this is what we're aiming for. We're all trying to reach perfection, although we know perfection isn't attainable. Jesus is the only one who is perfect. But we're all trying to reach that level. So why is it that we have to put on a face to go to church? That kind of seems like it's kind of going against one another there. Tristan said, probably how I could put it is not having a heart to wanting to forgive each other for what was done wrong. All right, so Renee is sharing her own experience. She said she's been judged and spiritually rebuked. You're completely right. There is a certain grace that comes with being spiritually rebuked. Those who have spiritually rebuked me have seen me through to deliverance. Judgment is a statement or a certain body language that doesn't aid in deliverance. Yes. I'm going to pin that so that we can know what judgment means here. Renee just gave us a perfect definition for judgment. She said judgment is a statement or a certain body language that does not aid in deliverance. So that's the main difference that we're striking between judgment and healthy spiritual rebuke, right? Judgment is a statement or a certain body language that does not aid in deliverance. So if what you're going to tell that person about their life is not going to help them change it, is not going to help them become better, isn't going to aid them in deliverance, then, maybe you should think twice about what you're saying, because there is a fine line between judgment and spiritually and healthy rebuke. So I love that you said that. Mona Clara said, people don't really understand the true meaning of being brothers and sisters in church. That's the problem. I agree. And let me stop here for a second. That is so true. You know, we love to call each other brothers and sisters in church. But why is it that we tend to rely on people outside of the church more? You know, for guidance, for, you know, speaking about our issues. Me personally, I can say that, of course, I have friends within the church, but my friends outside of my church congregation specifically are the people that I tend to be more open and transparent with. And I think that everyone experiences that on some level. And it comes back to this whole idea of believing that we have to pretend. We have to act as though everything is okay. We have to act as though, you know, we're not experiencing anything wrong, which is a huge issue. Ricard said that's the unfortunate reality. Church has become more so a political structure and a popularity contest. The ones that are protecting a position are not concerned about the people that are preaching the truth and being on both sides, the person being judged and outcasted to the person in a position of power and judging as an elder. On every level, there's real people and fake people. All you can do is be honest with yourself and live your life. But Ricard, one thing I want to mention about your comment is, you know, what we're trying to figure out here is how we can come together. How can we improve our relationships inside the church? How can we improve our relationships with one another? So, you know, of course, living your life is one option. But if we are going to be brothers and sisters and, you know, we are supposed to be doing life together, then there needs to be there needs to be, you know, some way that we can meet in the middle. There needs to be a way that we can, you know, be able to speak to one another. And of course, I understand the whole idea of not wanting to be completely transparent, but, you know, we have to kind of weigh the benefits and the losses there. Christina said, I've gotten to know people in the church and outside the church building aside from a Sunday. Sundays are on a set schedule. Go to church, greet each other, praise and worship, offering, preaching, then we are dismissed. We should go the extra mile to build relationship, even if it's a select few outside the agenda of a church service. I like what you said, Christina, because a lot of the people in the polls that we had done, they said that same thing. They said that, you know, there's not enough events that are going on. There's not enough social, you know, interactions going on. Do you truly think that the schedule of church is preventing us from being able to have relationships? And do you think if our church or church in general, if they did more events to allow people to come together, then everyone would feel more comfortable with one another? In order to be transparent, do you think it's also an issue of comfortability? Because I'm pretty sure the people that you're more willing to be transparent with are people that you are comfortable with. But if we don't have that comfortability with one another, then how can you be transparent with a person inside the church? So comfortability is something that we definitely have to address. Stacy said the church is not the building we worship in. It's me and you. That's right. It starts with me. It starts with we. We need to be the sister, the brother, the friend that will like someone to be us. I agree. Lovencia said, there is a social norm in the church for what is acceptable and unacceptable. When you open up about the things you struggle with, you are looked upon as someone who has no connection with the Holy Spirit. In our church, it is believed that there are certain things you shouldn't experience if you have the Holy Spirit. Lovencia, I want you to explain that. If you could come on, if you could join the live, then I would love for you to come on and elaborate on that some more. Renee said, I've been judged. Okay, no, she said I've been judged and spiritually rebuked. Yep, I agree with what Lovencia said. It's not the schedule and it's not really the event. So if it's not the schedule of church, if it's not the fact that we're coming to church, we're doing praise and worship, there's a sermon, and then we're let go. If it's not this, you know, what is it? If it's not events that are preventing us from being able to be comfortable with one another in order to be transparent with one another, then what is it? You know, aside from that, everyone is saying judgment. Everyone is saying that it's because we're afraid that somebody else will, think that we're not holy. But why is holiness, the lack of like, why does that have to be the lack of struggling? You know what I mean? Like, we already understand that we as Christians, we are not perfect. So yes, of course, we are striving for holiness every single day. But, emphasis on the word striving, we aren't there. None of us are holy. You know what I mean? None of us are holy. So why is it that if we understand that concept, if we know that none of us are truly holy, why can we not extend grace to someone else? I'm going to read another verse for you guys, another verse that I want to touch upon. And the verse is Galatians 6, verse 1 through 5. Galatians 6, verse 1 through 5. And it says this: Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. I'm going to repeat that verse, and I'm going to ask you guys, what do you really think this verse means in relation to the conversation that we're having? Again, the verse is Galatians 6, verse 1 to 5. It says, Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. For each one shall bear his own load. So you guys, take a look at the verse. We just mentioned it. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think. If anybody wants to join, they can come on. I think I have somebody asking to be joined here. Let me just see here. Okay. So what do you guys think that verse means in relation to the conversation that we're having? Okay, so Ricard says, in my opinion, there's a few ways for it to work. Everyone must be open and honest and be vulnerable. We must say the things that bother us, and others must listen. We must give them their time to speak, and we must listen with a clean heart and open mind. We can't play both sides or choose favorites in this. If someone is wrong, then we say they're wrong. Same way, if someone is right, then we say they are right. We must respect ourselves and each other. Pray more together. Have real conversations. Do Bible study and lessons together and get the love back. See each other as equals and as humans. Demal said, it's all about having a personal relationship with God outside of fearing how you live your life, for how people think about you, until you start living without fearing what people think of you. That's when you would just start living. Renee said, solution to better relationships within the church. 1, we learn to be real and transparent with ourselves. If we're not real with ourselves, and the same lie we're telling ourselves, we will be reflected in the church. Number 2, we make the effort to find mentors who will love on us but still reprimand us. I like that. Number 2, we make the effort to find mentors who will love on us but still reprimand us. Not judging. There's a difference between reprimanding and judging, not judging. Think of it as a job evaluation or a yearly inspection on your car. If you don't get checked, you're going to break down. You're not going to know what to fix or how to fix it. The church needs to fix the approach, but I will always say I stand by rebuke, because if it wasn't for rebuke, I would have been broken and still stagnant. Hating the approach won't change you. Find your tribe and get the love and help you need. It's up to you. It's up to us personally to find ourselves and the people who will build us up properly to get to where we need to be spiritually, naturally. I totally agree. But going back to the verse that we were mentioning, Galatians 6, verse 1 through 5. I think one of the things that it mentions here, and I think this is something for us to be weary of when we're trying to understand transparency. It says, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such one in a spirit of gentleness. That spirit of gentleness is key. Considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. How can we bear one another's burdens? How can we do that? How do you think we can bear each other's burdens? One thing that a lot of you guys mentioned is, this idea of comfortability. I want to kind of touch upon that for a second. Me personally, I don't think I've been able to go to people in my church and be open with them about what I'm struggling with. And I think it can be even more difficult when you have a specific platform within the church, if you have a specific position within the church, because people are so quick to, to be able to cancel you, especially in this cancel culture that we're living in. Anything that somebody does, we fail to be able to extend grace to them. And I think that if all of us within the church, we are able to decide to extend more grace to one another, to be able to, understand that, to be able to understand that we suffer with our own issues too, and to start speaking about it, then maybe somebody else can speak about it. And I think there's so much power in transparency. There's so much power in vulnerability. And if we learn that, then we are able to, create the path for somebody else, for them to then open up. Because once we're able to say, okay, I'm not perfect, I'm dealing with such and such. Yesterday, I was cursing, I have a cursing problem, or let's say you're saying, oh, I have a drinking problem, or, you're in a relationship and you fell into premarital sex or whatever it may be. Who can you truly go to and speak to somebody about that? You know what I mean? How can we extend grace to one another? Because if we don't do that, we're going to end up having a lot of people suffering in silence. I also want to mention one thing. I think there was a North American division for a specific denomination, but there was this survey that was done where it says a lot of people leave the church. One of the main reasons why people leave the church is because the church has abandoned them in moments when they are experiencing life changes or a crucial life event. And I think that there's so many transition periods that we have in our lives, whether it be death, whether it be, transitioning into being a teenager, or entering your 20s, or getting into a relationship, getting out of a relationship. So many things can happen during these transitions. And if these transitions are so crucial to our spiritual well-being as well, then how can we provide support to one another in these times, in those transitional periods, for us to be able to help one another? How can we be of help to one another? And I think one of the ways we can do that is transparency. Patricia said, how can we bear others' burdens if most of us can't even bear our own? Wow. Which is why people treat other people badly, because hurt people hurt people. Patu, if you can come on here and kind of explain that a little bit. I'm just reminding you guys can come on the live, you guys can join and speak, on your own rather than writing. You can actually join the live and kind of be able to share your own thoughts. So Patu, if you could come on here and please explain that for the people. She says, how can we bear others' burdens if most of us can't even bear our own? And while you say that, a question comes to mind, for you to be able to bear your own burden, what does that look like? What does it look like, being able to bear your own burden? I'm going to go to the comments again. Rose. Hey, Rose. Hey, Julove. Christina said, Galatians 6, verse 1 through 5, it means we're all in this together. Like you're saying, we must extend grace to all and acknowledge we aren't perfect. Rose says, do you think culture plays a heavy role in how relationships are formed and maintained, especially in predominantly Haitian churches here in America? Do you believe socioeconomic status plays a role in interaction between church congregations? That's a really great question. That's a really, really great question. So I'm going to open it up to everyone else. Do you think socioeconomic status, affects the interactions that we have in church? And can this be one of the reasons why we're not transparent with one another? What do you think? Madu said, until you have grace on yourself, you will understand or have the ability to do the same for others. That's right. I agree. Okay, so she's not going to join. But let's speak about that for a moment. Do you think that socioeconomic status truly affects our interactions in the church? Truly affect how we relate with one another? Because the church essentially is supposed to be a melting pot, right? We're supposed to be a family. And I would say to look at families outside the church as well. Like if you have a family member, right? Let's say you have a family member that, I don't know, they're making like, they're a millionaire, and you're like, I don't know, I don't want to shame people for like their amount, but you're not a millionaire. Let's say you have a family member who's a millionaire and you're not one. Should that, affect the way you're able to relate to that person if they're your family member? And depending on the answer, why can't we bring that same idea into the church? If we're a melting pot, if we're supposed to be a family, why should socioeconomic status affect how we relate to one another, how we interact with one another? Weijin said, in the Haitian culture, yes, it is, okay? Anissa said, yes, it does. Sadly, a lot of church people are very judgmental. So you do think that socioeconomic status affects the way we relate to one another. Is that what you're saying, Anissa? Sophia says, it's more about who you know and what you have to offer. Wow. Really? Is that how we think church is? Is that what people are believing to think that church is? It's more about who you know and what you have to offer. If that's the case, then I completely understand why people are afraid to be transparent with one another, right? Anissa said, yeah, I definitely agree with Sophia, okay? Sophia says, the issue is we aren't really a family, though. That's true. So then how can we become a family? How can the church, what can we do in order to grow closer to one another, in order to be able to strengthen our relationships, right? We know that there's power in relationship. The Bible tells us this. The Bible says, a threefold cord is better than one. We know that there's power in numbers. We know that there's so much power in our unity and coming together. And if we understand that, why is it so hard for us to do it? All of us are saying, transparency this, transparency that, it's because we're going to be judged. But I wouldn't say that every single person in the church is judgmental. So why don't we try to do the work ourselves? Start to be transparent to one person, or we start the transparency. Because, part of transparency is knowing that you're going to be judged and being able to accept whatever comes as a result of you being transparent, right? And I think that it's something that we have to be prepared for. Rose says, yep, I believe that education plays a role in what is accepted and what is not. Open-mindedness isn't something that you're born with. It is cultivated. Our Haitian culture is heavily focused on appearance and your title. It's hard to be a melting pot, and realistically, it isn't a utopia. But we understand that, we know the church isn't a utopia. We're all sinners. We are all a work in progress. We know that all of us aren't perfect. So if we are not perfect individually, then the church can't be, I guess, perfect. You know what I mean? But how can we aim for that? Caldine said social events. That forces us to bond and talk to one another. Now everyone on their phones at events. Yo, that's facts. That's real. That's real. Everyone's on their phone at events. But Caldine, let me ask you this. Do you think that when we have these social events, like let's say the phones are off, we try to be less guarded, we have these social events, our phones aren't out, we begin, interacting with one another. I know that one of the things that happens in church, and tell me if I'm wrong, if y'all don't agree, let me know. I'm open to hearing people that do not agree with this. If we do that, Caldine, and we get hurt in the process, we decide to be vulnerable. We are transparent about something that we're dealing with. And the next thing we know, the next Sunday or the next Saturday in church, what happens? Our business is all on Front Street. You know what I mean? How can we try to be transparent if we know that that's such a huge risk, And I know I've experienced that with many people within the church. You decide to open up to somebody about something that happened to you, and next thing you know, the whole church knows about it. So this is not doing a better job at, reinforcing this idea that we should be transparent. So how do we fix that? Sophia says no one wants to be the first one to show what they're struggling with. No one wants to really get out of their comfort zone. That's true. Anissa said it's like the saying, if 1,000 snakes are coming at you, just because 100 aren't trying to bite you, you will still run because the rest are still attacking. Even though some aren't judgmental, it's hard to be fully transparent because that fear is still there. Evna said, one has to ask questions. I know I'm transparent. If you knock on the door, if you ask a question, I'll answer it honestly. I prefer verbally though. I probably should talk about my faults more so that I don't deceive myself. I just have to find the right time to open up like that. Now, let me ask you guys this. While we're on the topic of transparency, because we're going to get off of it in a second. While we're on the topic of transparency, do you think there's such a thing as good transparency and bad transparency? And what do you think the difference is between the two, right? Is there such a thing as too much transparency in the church? Is there such a thing as being too open about the issues that you're dealing with? Is that such a thing? What is good transparency and what is bad transparency? I think that we have to understand that although we should be transparent, it's something that we are encouraging for all of us to do as a church community. But how, if we are being transparent, how do we regulate that transparency? How do we decide how transparent we should be, who we're going to be transparent with, so that we don't get burned? Or just listen to this, this is a thought. If you're transparent about something, can it seem as though you're glorifying it? And let me try to give a hypothetical example. Let's say, let's use drinking. Let's use drugs and drinking, right? Okay, let me not use drinking because I know a lot of y'all are going to come for me. Let's try to use drugs or as a hypothetical, right? Let's say you're in a church and you know somebody or a couple of people in the church, they're doing drugs, right? But they're open about it. They're transparent about it. They come to church and they're saying, yeah, I come to church. Yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm still, I still do drugs. I realize that there's this wave of t-shirts or messaging nowadays where it says, I'm still a Christian, but such and such and such. And it's like a crazy thing that we shouldn't even be doing as Christians. And it kind of seems as though we're borderline glorifying it at this point. So is transparency, is vulnerability always a good thing? Is there such a thing as too much transparency? Is there such a thing as too much vulnerability? And how can that affect our relationships? How can that lead another one to stumble? And does it truly glorify God? And I think in anything that we do, in anything that we decide to do, in any of the solutions that we come up with on this live, we should always decide whether that method or that path, does it glorify God in the long run, right? Do our actions, does our transparency, will our transparency and our vulnerability glorify God? Or are we just sitting here and saying, oh, yeah, I do this, I do that, I'm having premarital sex, yeah, I drink, yeah, I smoke weed, yeah, I do all these different things, and there's no change coming of it? Is transparency just saying, okay, I do this, and then that's it? Is that it? Because at some point, it can feel as though you're glorifying the sin rather than being simply transparent about it. Rose said, having more open talks like this one tonight, creating a vulnerable environment, whether our AYs and church programs aren't so constrained to just religion. We should open it up. We should open it every other aspect that affects everyday life, such as job fairs, immigration forums, helping first generation parents fill out FAFSA applications, everyday things that everyone can connect to. Padu said that may be someone's only form of therapy. I don't think there's a good or bad. Only real transparency. Okay, I follow. Sophia said, what is the purpose for sharing? Because we are not all in the same stages. So sometimes people can't handle what you are putting out there. Lejeune said it can be a way of asking for help. I totally agree. That's so true. Anissa said there shouldn't be a transparency regulation, in my opinion. The church should be a place of healing. So good or bad, we should be able to take it there. And by taking it there, I'm guessing you mean pushing the limits as to what, we're transparent about. Eric said, yes, certain contexts have this, such as confidential member information that the church board is aware of. Okay. Certain marital struggles. It's like in testimonies. You want to tell people that you were going astray, but don't talk about how it used to be enjoyable in the moment, because then people will try it. Sade said, I say as the upcoming generation, it's important that we pray for our leaders and their mindset changes, and that their mindset changes and that traditions change. We aren't aware of the issues, and as young adults, we need to come together and change the norm in our church so that we can become more transparent and future generations can also be open. I know it's hard, especially when you're raised in a church and they still see you as a child. Yo, that's facts. But there is a need for a shift. I totally agree. Christina says, I don't like it when people say I'm a Christian, but like, show me, don't tell me. Girl, yes. I don't like it when people say I am a Christian, but show me, don't tell me. If you say you're a Christian, you're glorifying your bad habits, you're probably putting up a front. I'm going to stop right there. What do you guys think about that comment? If you say you're a Christian and you're glorifying your bad habits, you're probably putting up a front. But we're still talking about this idea of transparency, right? For those that are just joining in, we're talking about, is the church helping or hurting your relationships? And right now we're on the topic of transparency within the church. Again, if anybody wants to join in, if anybody wants to come on and speak, you guys can share your opinions for sure. Again, follow all our social media. We're on RPRL show on Instagram, Real People Realize. I believe Carlene had posted all the links. Carlene, would you mind posting that again so I can actually pin it this time? So that everyone can know how they can get access to Real People Real Lives. But yes, to what Evna was saying, that's something that I personally find an issue with as well. Yes, we're a Christian, but I do this, right? It's something that we're saying. So what is the use? What is the value of transparency if we're going to be transparent and we're not going to change? Of course, we're a work in progress, but we do have to understand that above all, the Christian walk is about progressing. Sometimes you may backslide. Sometimes you may take 3 steps back. You may take 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. You know what I mean? But that's kind of part of the Christian walk. But how are you able to be real? How do we maintain our realness about what we're going through without glorifying it, without making it seem as though this is just something that I'm doing and I don't care and this is how it's going to be? How do we do that? So I just pinned Carlene's comment. How can we differentiate between the two things? When is transparency too much? When is transparency glorification of sin? So I'm just going to leave you guys with that thought for a second. If you guys want to join in again, you are free to do so. If you guys want to come in and speak on a video and, just so that everyone can hear you and you can actually speak your thoughts, you can definitely do so. I just want to remind you guys of that. So one thing, I kind of want to switch gears for a little bit. We're going to come back to transparency, but I kind of want to switch gears and talk about accountability, because that kind of goes hand in hand with transparency, right? If you're going to be transparent with somebody inside the church, if you're going to be open about the things that you're dealing with, I would say that you should be open with somebody that is going to be accountable and help you out of that sin. Like Renee was saying before, she said healthy rebuke has allowed her to reach deliverance. And the people that were able to speak to her about her circumstances or whatever she was doing, that led to her, deepening her relationship with Christ. So if we're going to be transparent, right, then there needs to be a level of accountability there as well. There needs to be a way that we're accountable for one another. If we're going to call ourselves a family, if we're going to call ourselves brothers and sisters, there needs to be some form of accountability between us. Because yes, we accept that we are all sinners. We accept that no one's perfect. We get that. And yes, people can have the freedom to be transparent, to be open, to be vulnerable with us. But as a friend, as somebody in the church, as a member of the church, if somebody comes to you right now and tells you that they're dealing with a sin, how are you going to deal with it? Let me hear your thoughts. If somebody comes to you and they're open with you about a sin that they're struggling with, that is preventing them, or that is kind of harming their Christian walk in some sense, they come and tell you that I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this thing and I can't get rid of it. Like, I've been dealing with it for about 6 months now. How do we act? And like, are we accountable for them? Do we tell them, okay, I got you. I'm going to help you out of this. I may not be perfect, but I may not be dealing with this specific sin. I may be dealing with another sin that you can help me out of, but I'm not dealing with this, the thing that you're dealing with. So let me be accountable to you for that. How many of us can say that we have accountability partners inside the church? How many of us can say that if we are actually open, that somebody will be accountable for us? Because, what is the value of that transparency if it's not going to change your life? If it's not going to allow you to have a better relationship with Christ and bring you to deliverance? So let me hear your thoughts. Religion says, choose wisely who you will be transparent to, and to hold that person accountable. So Legion, are you saying that you, as a person who is being vulnerable, as a person who is going to be speaking about your sins or whatever it is that you're dealing with, are you saying that that person, the burden is on them? The burden is on them to get the person that they're speaking to be accountable? Because I would think it would be the other way around, right? Let me hear your thoughts on that. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Rose says, yes, accountability is key, and this is a slippery slope. Our generation isn't open to being told things are right or wrong. Everyone wants to be accepted, as we should. But the purpose of the gospel isn't to just accept, but to lovingly redirect. I completely agree with you. Like, that's a great point. Rose said, the purpose of the gospel isn't to just accept, but to lovingly redirect. And how do we do that? Do you believe that you do that? And I guess that one of the questions I want to ask is, when you are being transparent with somebody, when you're being open about your sins, what are you trying to get out of that, right? If you're not looking for somebody to help you out of it, then what is the purpose of you sharing that? Do you just want somebody to co-sign your nonsense? Is that why you're open to somebody in the church? Or are you looking for accountability? Lovencia said, no need to be transparent to the whole church. Just have a confidant that can pray with you and help you grow. I absolutely agree, Lovencia, but will that person do that? Do you go for that? Do you request that when you when you decide to be transparent with somebody? Or do you just say, hey, so-and-so, I'm dealing with this right now. And yeah, that's it. Is there a call? Like, is there something that is done afterwards? And I know that Eric had mentioned something before. I think he said something along the lines of, sometimes it can be really sensitive, the topics that we decide to be transparent about. Marriage, relationships. Sometimes being transparent about what is happening in your relationships kind of means putting your partner on Front Street as well. And I think that's something that we need to be wary about. When we are being transparent, what are you being transparent about, right? Is what you're being transparent about something that you're dealing with? And yeah, and I understand that, but can it also lead to somebody else being vulnerable, or can it lead to the vulnerability of somebody else that was not yet ready to be vulnerable? If y'all get what I'm saying, can it lead to that? Because it's one thing to be transparent, right? But what are you being transparent about? Should we be mindful about what we are transparent about? There are many sins and there are many things that we deal with, right? One of the people in the polls, they had mentioned that, when too many people are spending too much time, concealing their struggles, concealing what they're dealing with, whether it be in relationships or whatever it is. So if we are concealing the struggles that we go through in relationships, how can we be an example to others? How can we show them that you can grow from this? How can we show them that you can be redeemed? How can we show them that, my marriage was rocky, but we grew from this? Like, is it something that we do in hindsight? Is it something that we look back once we've already, once I'm good and I've gotten over that sin, then I'm sharing it? Or can you share it in the moment? Can you share it in the moment? And when you share it in the moment, how does accountability work? Eli said, an accountability partner doesn't have to be in your specific church. I agree. Transparency is very delicate, and if misplaced, can lead to people leaving the church. And a lot of people have left the church for that. A lot of people have left because they have been transparent and it wasn't, the person didn't respond well. You know, the people that they were transparent with, you know, they didn't respond well to it and they left the church. Sade said, we are accountable to our brothers and sisters in all aspects. If someone comes to you with something that maybe you don't know how to help them with, then I believe both individuals need to pray together and seek out a leader who can better help with the situation. Don't just hand them over to the leader. Follow up. Following up is key. It allows the person to know, look, you asked for help and now you must do your part. And Shadi, I love what you said because it's solution driven, right? I love that comment because it teaches us, you know, how we can actually deal with it. Because what good is it for us to be, you know, saying all this, like speaking about all of this and having this great discussion about how we can be more open, how we can be more accountable for our brothers and sisters in church, how we can be more transparent, how we can judge less, and rather than judging, how we can spiritually rebuke somebody or lovingly rebuke somebody. If we're having that conversation, then there needs to be solutions to it. So, of course, one of the solutions is prayer, prayer, prayer. And I think that's one of the things that prevents, you know, people in the church, especially young people, from being able to be transparent with one another or being accountable for our brothers and sisters, right? Because if we're not, like, how are we going to be accountable for somebody else if we're not even accountable for our own lives? Like, if I do something, am I able to recognize what I did wrong and go to the Father and be able to pray about it and be able to say, yo, God, I messed up. Like, I did this. I don't know how to get over it. Like, I don't know how to, like, I'm struggling with the sin and I can't get over it. If we don't do that with our own sins, right? How are we going to be able to help somebody? If we don't pray about our own sins, how are we going to be able to help someone when they come to us and they're telling us they're dealing with this? What support can we provide, right? And I think prayer is key. It's one of the huge things that we can do. And I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think that's something that's being done enough with people, like with each other. Of course, you know, you go to church and there's corporate prayer, right? You know, everybody goes in the front. There's a one person that prays with everybody. Sometimes, on occasion, they'll tell you to, you know, join up with another person, pray for the person, ask them what they're dealing with. And I think that those moments, right? Those moments that usually happen at watch nights or vespers or whatever it be, like, why is that not something that we do more? Why is that not something that we remove out of the realm of a vesper only, right? Out of the context of a vesper or a midnight prayer. Why don't we remove that out of that context and apply it daily, right? Why don't we call somebody up that, you know, we're in church with or that we go to church with and say, hey, how can I pray for you this week? What are you struggling with? And I think that some people will be more receptive to speaking to us about what they're struggling with if we actually ask, which is something that Christina touched upon as well. She said, you know, she will be transparent if somebody asks her about what she's struggling with, right? And I think that if we, you know, call one of our girls up or one of our boys up or, you know, whoever it may be in the church, if we call each other and we contact with one another and we reach out to the other person and say, I want to pray for you. I don't know what you're dealing with. You can tell me what you're dealing with. I want to pray for you, right? How can we do that in a way that is healthy? And why don't we do that enough? That's one of the solutions, being able to reach out to one another and pray for one another. Riaz says, we can't be transparent to the whole church. The church itself is full of bad seed. Yeah, I understand that. And no one's saying for you to be transparent to the whole church. Everyone's saying for you to be transparent. Choose one person that you feel like you can be transparent with. But the thing is, how do you select that person? How do you choose that that's a person that you can be transparent with if, one, you've never been transparent with them before? You know, how do you decide who to be transparent to? Because there is some level of risk involved with that. It's like playing Russian roulette with the information that you're giving. Rose said, I think differently. I think prayer is key, but there has to be more. Maybe seeking a counselor, therapist. So many sins that we deal with affect us emotionally and mentally. Can you elaborate on that, Rose? Of course, you guys can always call in. I don't want it to just be me talking. I would love for somebody to, join in and speak about what your own beliefs as well. Christina said, if someone comes to me with a trouble, I would probably need to take a step back because I need to evaluate how I can help. Is it scriptural? Definitely constant contact is creating accountability. Prayer is necessary, right? So, Rose, explain to me what you mean by that. Rose says that prayer is not the only thing. Like, prayer is not the only key, right? We need more than prayer. And I absolutely agree with Rose. But what are the other solutions that we can come up with? What are the other things that we can decide to do to be able to create this culture of transparency, to create this culture of being able to be accountable for one another, to be able to create this culture of not judging one another, but rather being able to spiritually rebuke somebody? I think one thing that each of us can do, right? That each and every single one of us can do, a step that we can take, is to be receptive to what somebody says to us. And receptive in the sense that if we do decide to be transparent and open up about something that we're dealing with, and that person decides to lovingly rebuke us, are we gonna wall out? Are we just gonna wall out and be like, no, I told you this, and now you're trying to change me? You ain't better than me. Like, we hear that so much, with people trying to do that, with people saying that they opened up to somebody and now the person's judging them. And sometimes that's not the case. We have to be receptive to loving rebuke as well. And how can we do that? Eli said, I think saying to pray is so cliche. Not that prayer shouldn't be that focal point for trying to achieve deliverance, but if that's all we're going to do with the person without trying to make ourselves available for them, then we're only doing the bare minimum. Not that prayer is minimal. But okay, I agree with you. We shouldn't only focus on prayer. But then what can we do to provide accountability for that person without the person feeling as though we're overstepping boundaries, as though we're getting into their business? How do we do that? I think we should really bring the discussion there. What are the solutions that we can come up with? Yes, we understand that the majority of us do not believe that the church is transparent. There's a lack of transparency in the church. We understand that most of us believe that people are judgmental. Yeah, we understand that most of us believe that we don't have accountability partners in the church. But one, it starts with us. And yes, we can pray, but what do we do? What are the solutions that you guys can propose to do? That we can do. Of course, anybody can join in. If you want to request, you can just send a request for you to join in for a video and share your thoughts, share your opinions, share your experiences. Have any of you guys had healthy experiences? I know Renee talked about her healthy experience. But have any of you guys had experienced any great relationships in the church that you feel has pushed you towards Christ, has allowed you to be transparent, has allowed you to be vulnerable, has allowed you to be to have an accountability partner, and you feel like that person is able to lovingly rebuke you? If you do, how does that person do it? If it's not just through prayer, then share with me. How has that person done it? Okay. Personally, I can say that with me, I have people that check up on me, and I will actually ask, how are you? Not just like the how are you, the church how are you, where you don't even wait for the answer, but like, how are you really? How are you really? What are you dealing with? Like, how's school? Is school going good? Like, we all love to say we're fine when we know we're not fine. And yes, we understand that there's testimonies that come afterwards, and there's beauty in the testimony. But I think there's also beauty in helping each other out through the struggles, right? If somebody is let's say somebody opens up to you. I think this is a solution. Let's say somebody opens up to you about them having difficulty with school, right? They're having struggles in school with a class. Rather than praying for them and say, okay, and prayer is good, you should do it. Rather than praying for them to pass the class, what can you offer? Can you decide to, let's meet up and study together? I'll make sure that you're being focused, rather than procrastinating. Or if somebody tells you that they're having an issue with drinking alcohol, right? They have an alcohol problem. then one way you can provide support rather than just praying for them, say, okay, sit down with them, try to figure out what is the root of this alcohol issue. Is it the places that you're going to where you're finding alcohol? Is it the people you're hanging out with? Is it the settings that you're in? And how can we change those things? Like, I think there's a lot of brainstorming that needs to happen rather than just praying, because we need to find a solution to be able to help one another. Eric said, yes, just care. Yes, just care. I absolutely agree. And we're not doing enough of that. I think a lot of us care about each other. We care about each other in parts, right? And what I mean by that is we care about each other in one aspect alone. You know, you'll see people in the church, they have like a friend or two, and, you know, they're with that friend all the time. And, you know, the church at large, you know, they seem to care about you. They care about your gifts. They care about your ministries. They love how you're able to support the church. But do you care about the whole person? Because the whole person is not just a person that comes to church on Sunday morning or on Saturday morning or whatever it may be. The person that comes to church went through like a whole 5-6 days of nonsense that they've dealt with, of things that have hurt them, you know, having breakdowns about whatever, having arguments with their spouse, or falling into a sin that they had felt like they were, you know, freed from and then fell back into it. We should not be only caring about one another on the days that we come to church, but on the other days, what are we doing? You know, like, are we even talking to each other? Do you talk to the people in church, you know, when it's not the weekend? Are you just on their Instagram, like saying, hey girl, I see you. Yes, you pop in. Like, we're watching each other's story. We're watching each other's stories on Instagram or Facebook, and we're seeing what each other, you know, what we're doing. But where's the relationship? You know, where's the personal relationship? And I think that the topic of this live is the church helping or hurting your relationships? But I think we should also consider, is the relationship that we have one another hurting the church, right? You know, flipping it back, like flipping it the other way around. Not is the church helping our relationships, but is the relationship that we have with one another hurting the church at large? Because as somebody said before, we do make up the church. The church isn't a building. It's not 4 walls. We are the church. So if our relationships are flawed, if our relationships with one another are broken, and, you know, is that what's hurting the church rather than the other way around? I think that's something to think about. Eli said that goes to the spirit of discernment on both parts. The person asking for help should be able to discern whether whom they're going to is of the right spirit. And for the person providing accountability, they should be able to discern how to reach and speak to the person asking for help in the right manner. I absolutely agree with you, but what is the right manner, right? That's one of the questions we should touch upon. Rose says, someone who identifies with the LGBTQ community. They come to you and they open up about living this lifestyle. After prayer, what do we do? Someone dealing with porn, what do we do after prayer? Wow, that's a powerful question. I'm gonna hold it right there, Rose. I'm gonna come back to that because we have to speak on that. Sophia said, I have had both experiences, and when I mention particular struggles I'm facing, I will get a variety of inspirational texts, sermons, Bible verses, or book references? Oh, book referrals, and even funny memes. Okay, that's a good way that we could deal with it, but that's still kind of an arm's length away. You know, you're helping from a distance. How can we help one another up close? How can we help one another, you know, on a more personal level? Like, yeah, I could send you sermons, I could send you texts, but like, what am I doing to actually help you? Stacy said, it starts with little stuff. Be there in the good and the bad. Trust is everything. I agree. Trust is everything, and you should just be there. Sometimes being there is enough. I'm not going to discount that. Rose says, so I'm going to open up and be transparent. So listen up, guys. Rose is sharing her own experience. I have had a parent come up to me asking me for help about her daughter identifying as a lesbian. She pleaded with me to talk to her daughter. I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was honest with myself and that I had no idea how to approach the situation. No idea of how I felt about it personally, and I felt that I wasn't spiritually aligned to approach this. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Rose. You know, this is the transparency that we need, because you said this, right? You've decided to open up and be transparent about this. And I'm pretty sure there are other people who have had situations where people have come to them and been transparent. And here you're speaking about how in that moment you didn't feel as though you were qualified enough, or you didn't feel like you were spiritually empowered or spiritually aligned in order to help that person. So I think that's something that we should discuss too. You know, we're speaking about helping one another, but are we always fit to help one another? Which is what I was going back to before. How are you going to react to it? Are you going to just bring that person deeper in sin? You know, do you have the knowledge to help them? And in that case, what do? You can refer them to a professional, right? To a therapist for them to speak about their issues, but that's just speaking about it. And we want to get to the point, or to the state where we're not only speaking and being transparent about what we're dealing with, but also how can we change the act, right? How can we change the issue that we're being transparent about in order for it to help us grow closer to Christ? So thank you, Rose, for that. In that situation, I wouldn't know how to deal with it either. I'm going to be completely honest. You know, somebody comes to you and tells you that their daughter is a video. Eric, I see that you're asking to come on. I'm gonna approve you right now. I'm just gonna, you know, somebody that comes to you telling you that their daughter is a lesbian. How do you deal with that? Because can you truly help somebody not become, not be a lesbian? Like, can you truly help that? You know, I don't know the answer to that question either, but if one of you guys do, then definitely join in. Okay, Eric, I'm listening.
All right, sister. How are you?
I'm great, and yourself?
Yes, this is a powerful talk tonight. Basically, I just want to say one thing I've been saying a lot because I've heard it. Information without a relationship is intimidation.
Wow.
So when we have leaders or elders or a pastor in the church, the first thing that they should be looking towards, and ourselves as youth leaders or leaders in general, we should be looking towards having relationships. And that kind of relationship needs to be just genuine. We're too, I think, occupied with fake relationships, which is we say hi at church, we say how you doing, and then after that, that's it. We don't care how you're doing. In reality, in fact, sometimes even if you're successful or doing well, we're actually jealous, or we're talking bad about you behind your back and stuff like that. And we don't have that genuine compassion and love. And usually a lot of young people, they see that hypocrisy, and that's why they don't trust the church. I'm not gonna be long. I'll just go right.
No, keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, keep going. All right. Basically, what I posted earlier today, Jesus had basically Judas in his organization. He knew before Judas would betray him that he would betray him. And yet Jesus allowed Judas to stay right beside him, right next to him when he's doing all kinds of amazing things, because he loved Judas. And even if Judas never loved Jesus truly, and we know that pretty much for a fact, Jesus still loved him. So in church, we need to have that kind of love. And those who are spiritually mature need to reflect Jesus's character by loving every single person. One thing I can't stand, and I've seen it in certain churches, certain Caribbean churches, is the clique mentality, where we're in a church and my best friend is my best friend. And if my best friend has an issue with this person in the church, I'm not hanging out with that person in the church. I sit this place in the church every single Sabbath. And if somebody's sitting in that place, I'm upset because this is where my clique sits. That's not what the church is for. The church is for everyone to be mingling so much that everyone feels like we're a family here. And if we're not having that, we are hurting relationships, because we're going up on the pulpit and talking about Jesus Christ, who hung out with everybody. That's the gospel. He came onto this planet where everybody was in a clique mentality. Everyone was a segregation. Everyone was saying, "Oh, I'm better than you," or "I'm," they all had their own place in their corner. But then uh, Jesus comes and he says, "Nope, I'm hanging out with everybody. I'm having a conversation with Pharisees, Sadducees, prostitutes, lepers who aren't even supposed, even according to the law, you're not even supposed to talk to those people." Jesus talked to those people and touched them. So there's going to be a disconnect. And we're going to be saying the church is hurting relationships when we're supposed to be fostering and creating and generating relationships. So one last thing I'll just say is that youth leaders out there, mentor young people, have intentional relationships. There's somebody in your church that you need to actually pay attention to and say, let me go over there and have a conversation with them. And one quick thing on that advice on that lesbian thing, definitely I understand the hesitancy to talk to that person, because if you didn't have a relationship with that person, I wouldn't talk to that person because you didn't have a relationship. But if you already have that relationship, you'll know what to do. Keep your advice at the cross. All right.
But wait,
God bless.
before you go.
Oh yes.
Like I have a question for you, because you mentioned this whole idea that, it's this whole idea of fake relationships, right? And I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Like, we're talking about, is the church helping or hurting relationships, but is the nature of our relationships really actually hurting the church, right? And if you're saying that it's the fake relationships, we're not able to be real with one another. We're not able to be, that's what's preventing us from being transparent. That's what's preventing us, to be able to build this community. Then how do we solve that? You know what I mean? How do we solve this fake relationships? Because everyone has this conception, or there's a stigma that's already plaguing the church right now, that church people, this is what happens. Christians, this is how we are. So of course one can say, you can be the difference, right? You can be the one to change things. But how do we move beyond, being one, afraid of being able to take that step, and two, how can we as a church foster that environment? You know what I mean? How can we create that environment? What do we need to do in order for that to happen? Does it start with us, or can something be done on a larger scale?
It does have to start with you yourself, and then you can basically introduce it into certain programs into the church. And I say it starts with you, because then people will start to see the power of it. One of the things that people will notice about me is I can talk to any young person and they'll tell me anything. Parents are always like, how come young people tell you everything? And I'm just like, because I have relationships with them. I care about them. I'm not there to just correct them and their behavior, because if I'm just there just to correct behavior or make the church as a place for correction of behavior, it becomes a controlling environment, and young people don't believe in controlling environments. And when they see your example, then they'll understand the need to stop having fake relationships. But it does have to start with you, because that's how Jesus did it. Jesus basically, he preached it, but he also showed it, because that's what he did with the disciples. He said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. So ourselves, we have to turn to Jesus, have Jesus in our heart, so we can start hanging out with these people that we have a tough time hanging out with. Yeah.
Listen, you're speaking facts right now. You're definitely speaking facts. And the fact that young people are able to trust you, I think that's amazing. If, a person, if you find one person in the church that you can speak about anything with, that's a gem, because people don't find that every day. And I love the fact that you said, you allow them to just speak their mind without trying to correct them yet. Because I believe that relationship can lead to correction without us maybe doing it ourselves, right? Sometimes just the simple fact that you are in a relationship with that person and you are being the example, right? By virtue of that person having a relationship with you, they're just like, okay, wow, like, you can start rubbing off on them, rather than you saying, okay, I don't do this, so you need to stop doing that as well. Or if you want to hang with me, I need you to stop drinking. If you want to hang with me, I need you to stop fornicating. If you like you said, Jesus didn't act that way. He allowed these people to come near him. He allowed these people to be in community with him, in relationship with him, right? And how, if he's doing that, then why are we not following that same example. So thank you so much. I think you made
Yes.
some great points. And I'm going to go to the comments so I can see what everyone's saying about it as well.
God bless.
Alrighty. So I'm going to go to the comments. Let me see what you guys are saying. Yandel said, I can't stand the click mentality. Man, I can't stand it either. Evna said, if you want to grow together in God, definitely getting in the scriptures is something you can do. Get into the context, lessons, and guidance of the authors. The word can convict people all in itself. Girl, yes. And I think that kind of touches on what Eric was saying too. You know, sometimes you don't always have to force somebody. You don't always have to force them to act. And yes, you can rebuke, but if you choose not to rebuke, right, there are other ways of going about it. Like Christina said, you can decide to, study scripture together, build a relationship with that person. All right, girl, or all right, bro, let's start, meeting every week over the phone or over FaceTime or whatever it may be. Let's start studying the word together, right? And you don't gotta go and start picking out scriptures that have to do with specifically what the person's dealing with and throwing shade in that way, or don't do that. I'm not telling y'all to go do that. But if you guys do build a relationship with one another, a relationship that does have spiritual tones and is founded on Christ, that can allow you within itself to allow that person to change, to help that person to, turn their back on what they were doing. And I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of people forget that, sometimes you don't have to even speak on it. Sometimes, one, you can be the example, and two, you can allow that person to befriend you. You can build a relationship with that person, study the word together, because like Christina said, the word convicts in itself. So if you're too scared to do it, listen, God is seeing that relationship and God will do it for you. So if you guys are studying the word together, God may just reveal something to that person that allows them to turn from their way. So thank you, Christina, for that. Sophia said, you can't prevent someone from becoming lesbian, but you can still reach out to the person because they are in need of care and compassion. And I don't believe that situation fell in your lap for a reason. So I guess I need to ask God, why me and what now? I think that is totally true. Sometimes we do feel as though we are not qualified, yet if God brought that situation to us, then maybe he feels as though we are the right person. So Rose, maybe you can take advice from that. You may not feel like you're qualified, but maybe God is using you for something greater. Maybe you don't have to speak against that. Maybe that's not even, especially since you said you don't know where you stand, maybe you don't have to speak against it, but rather, if you can build a relationship with that person, like Eric was saying, allow them to be able to trust you, be trustworthy, be worthy of the trust that they're willing to place in you, and maybe that within itself can lead to change. Kenley said, other than prayers, the church needs to invest in educating our kids, not only during regular service day, but by building schools that is affordable to the people in the community. This way our kids can have a Christ-like education and interact with each other daily. Nowadays, I feel like leaders focus more on making a living out of the crowd. Let's see. Christina said, it starts with me. Loventia said, there are people who have the gift of communication. It is an actual ministry when someone is able to reach people. I agree. Hey, Pastor Dudley, you just joined. Rose said, I also feel that pastors and elders and leaders aren't fully equipped for this generation. I feel like they care more about membership, crusades, and lay ministry. They have lost the purpose of the gospel. So, Rose, are you saying that the fact that these leaders you're saying are not equipped for this generation, is it because they're not able to build a relationship with us? Are they just do they just stand at an arm's length and try to go about daily services and build a relationship that's built on distance? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that the leaders in our church, they're not equipped because they don't understand what having a relationship with actual church members is? Eli said, I think Genesis 3, starting from verse 9, has the best approach to transparency and accountability. All right, let's hear it. We steer so far from the blueprint scripture that has become Harris in both parts to holistically communicate. So, Eli, would you mind posting that verse in the comments, just so that we can discuss it? Eric said, Satan uses hypocrisy to distract us from the power of the gospel. If Christians are authentic and reflecting Jesus' character, more would be converted like in the day of the Pentecost. I totally agree. I agree 100%. And I think that's what we fail to do, right? We like to focus on changing someone, right? And of course, we can change somebody, but there's a level of acceptance that we need to have first before the change occurs. I see it, I kind of see it the same way as a relationship, right? You don't enter a relationship trying to change the person. You see what they bring to the table, and then you decide how you're going to work with that. Change will happen just naturally by virtue of you being with that person. You guys will rub off on one another. Your relationship will probably push that person to do better in life. By virtue of the relationship, the change comes from you having a relationship with that person. So if in our relationships we don't go and try to change somebody, then why is it that in our church relationships, aside from our romantic relationships, in our relationships with church people, we go in trying to change someone rather than trying to first accept them for who they are and then allow the change to come later on as you develop a stronger relationship with that person. Rose said you only see them on Saturdays, and that's that. No relationship at all. I agree. Well, it's not just one verse. It's starting from verse 9 to the end. Okay, so just let me know if you post it. Okay, Eli said God dealing with Adam and Eve when they first sinned. So tell me, what is it that you think about that, Eli? So yeah, like we were saying before, we're focusing on solutions here, right? So with everything that we're speaking about right now, with everything that, this whole discussion that we're having, I want to ask you guys, right? What are you going to do to change this narrative? It's not enough to just speak about it. It's not enough to point fingers and say, people do this, people do that. What are you going to do within the next coming weeks, within the coming months? What are you deciding to do? Because I want us to not just have this discussion. And yes, it's beautiful for us to be able to break down the problems. But I want us to be able to decide, what are we going to do, when it comes to dealing with our relationships. One thing that I love, and I think it's Gasmere. If you guys know Gasmere, here's the one that usually says this. He usually brings up the idea of being a spiritual vault, right? And I think that's one step that I can take in trying to, foster, allow people to be transparent with me, for them to have trust in me, for me to be able to be accountable for them and not judging them, is being a spiritual vault. Like, how many of us can say that we are that? How many people can say that a person comes to you with something, they're dealing with it, and you're not going to go to the next person and be like, girl or bro, listen, she told me this, she's dealing with this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just freely going and telling somebody else what a person is dealing with. If they told you, that means they trust you. And how are you going to act with that trust? Because clearly a lot of people have felt betrayed when it comes to them speaking or opening up to somebody, which is why a lot of people have this conception about people within the church, or how the church does not foster transparency and they can't speak to anybody in their church. A lot of people have been burned. So if we don't want people being burned, then what can we pledge to do in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in the coming years, in our personal relationships? What can we pledge to do to allow, to be a person that is worthy of somebody's trust, to be a person that is worthy of somebody being transparent with us? How can we do that? Stacy says, thank God I feel so blessed having somebody in my life that I can talk to, I can pray with. I had to let my guard down to let people in and pray for clarity. I can't brag about it because the Holy Spirit did it. I've been praying for years to have a true friend in my life. Believe me, it's a great feeling. I can imagine. Rose says, well, it's hard to do in the church because there's this hierarchy in place. And if you don't hold a certain position or title, they aren't open to just seeing things happen. Programs have to be ran through committee where they can discuss for hours on how much it isn't spiritual enough. And when programs come into play, they're superficial. So it's hard. I understand what you're saying, Rose, and I totally agree. But if we know that it can't happen on a higher level within the church, within the four walls of the church, and we're saying that it's up to us to change the narrative, then what can we do? Okay, there can't be programs, right? The church doesn't want to hold a program. Then why don't we take 3 or 4 or 5 of our friends in the church and decide, okay, we're gonna go to brunch, or we're gonna have like this intimate time together, or we're gonna create our own event outside the church, having nothing to do with the church. We're going to come together and we're going to create what we want to see within the church, right? And I think that's where a lot of us are failing. Like we were saying before, we see each other in church, and yeah, we're friends for that day, but after, like outside of church, what are we doing? Are we spiritually connecting? Do we even have a relationship? And what is the nature of that relationship? Is it a fake friend? Is it a friend that is gonna be there, supporting your antics, the negative antics that you're getting involved with during the week? Are they that friend, or is it a friend that you can sit down and break down your issues to? You can sit down and tell them what you're struggling with. Are we that friend, and how can we be that friend? Kenley said tithe and offering, investment in schooling like the Jewish community. Okay. Eric said mentor one person and find one person to mentor you. Let it be organic, but be intentional. I agree, because relationships do have to be organic, right? So that somebody is not weary or skeptical about why you're trying to build a relationship with them, right? So I think that's truly, truly important. Eli said, copy, pretty much. When you look at the situation, God didn't stop at just asking what happened, or he didn't go to straight rebuking, but he not only asked, searched for them, and then rebuked, but provided a solution for them. It's hard for people to be transparent when there isn't always a solution at hand, and they aren't being checked upon regularly, just rebuked. It's like, why ask for support if you feel like you'll only be rebuked, punished, if there isn't any actual help being presented? And that's what we're discussing here. We're saying, how do we move from help? From how do we move from rebuking or punishing and trying to decide to be that friend and build a relationship rather than rebuking? You're providing support by virtue of your relationship. How can we do that? Hey, Onike. So, again, I think when we're ending things, we need to look to the Bible, right? If we look at the friendships in the Bible, right? People that were best friends. Let's take David and Jonathan, for example. I think it was David and Jonathan. Let's take David and Jonathan, for example. They were bros, like they were brothers, like they were homies. And listen, in that situation, you would not even believe or even think that it's something that could happen, considering the situation that was at hand with, Jonathan's dad trying to, with Saul trying to kill David and all that stuff. Yet that relationship happened organically. It's something that nobody would have thought could have happened. Yet that was the relationship that was formed. You know what I mean? And I don't think that we have strong friendships nowadays, whether inside or outside of the church. And I think there is power in strong friendships. There is power in having strong godly friendships. And I think that if we had more of those, then we can better ourselves and our spiritual lives can be affected in a good way as well. Yendel says, Jesus was having relationships with the prostitutes, robbers, Matthew, who was a tax collector, etc. Jesus was having relationships with people who were at the lowest. Why is it that the church is focused on the inside? Why is it the church is focused on the inside, which is a building where we sit and do the same routine, instead of the outside, where we go outside and tell others who Christ is and build on relationships? Sophia said, what I do at my church is reach out to all the young adults in my church and have programs at someone's house to discuss different things that are important to us. That way, it's taking away the unnecessary recite from church. Yeah. See, Sophia mentioned a great solution. The fact that we can, if your church is preventing you, if right now you know that you want to build relationships with people that are inside your church, and you feel as though your church is preventing you from doing that because everything y'all got to plan has to pass through committee, and before the event goes to committee that they're going to say no to it. If you know that's going to happen, do what Sophia said. Reach out to different people. Have your own events. Create the culture that you are not seeing in the church. Create it outside, because realistically, it's the people who make up the church. If inside your church they're not allowing you to have it, well, you guys can still build a relationship without it having to be something that is at the discretion of leaders in the church. Rose says, because so many people inside are just as broken. If you don't fix the inside, you can't fix the outside. I agree. Eric said, Jonathan loved David even though it was detrimental to his own safety. Right? We don't have friendships like that nowadays. That's a great point. Like, Jonathan loved David knowing that his dad was out to kill him. How are you going to be friends with one of your dad's enemies? That's a risk right there. You know what I mean? That is a total risk. But we have to understand that we need to be open for these relationships to occur, right? For these relationships to be built, we need to be able to be open, for us to be able to help one another. Rose says, preach this, or true friendships are hard to find. Superficiality is prevalent in this generation. I totally agree. And again, we have to be the change guys. You can't be waiting for the church to do something. The main points that we talked about here in this live, of course, the question that we're talking about is the church helping or hurting your relationships. We spoke about transparency, whether you should be transparent with people in the church. Does the church create a space for everyone to be transparent? We spoke about accountability. What happens once a person is transparent with you? Are you accountable for them? Do you reach out? Do you check up on them? Right? And we spoke about judgment. Stop judging people for what they're going through. Accept them anyway. Jesus hung out with everybody, and the change happened afterwards. The change came from the relationships. So although we started with this whole idea and this whole question of, is the church helping or hurting your relationships, I think what we should be leaving with today is this idea that our relationships, is it hurting the church? Is the nature of our relationships hurting the church? Are the type of relationships that we're having and how they're done, is it truly helping the church, and is it allowing us to grow closer to one another? Eli said not only was his dad out to kill him, but David was going to take his seat on the throne when Saul died. That didn't deter their friendship. Yes, yes, yes. And Rose said that takes discernment and spiritual maturity. Absolutely, Rose. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because spiritual maturity, I feel as though if we all take it upon ourselves, right? We do the inside work. We decide that we're going to pray. We decide that we're going to work on ourselves. We decide that we're going to be more open. We decide that we're going to take the first step, reach out to people. We decide that we're not going to be so guarded. We're not going to be closed off. We decide that we're going to alter our perception and our view of how we see people, so that people don't feel as though they have to resort to spiritual pretense in order to form relationships. Because once you fall in that box of spiritual pretense, right, the relationships that you're gonna build, they're not building a relationship with you. They're building a relationship with the fake you, with the person that you are on Saturday mornings, with the person that you are on Sunday mornings. That's what they're building. And if we want to be able to build organic relationships, if we want to be able to build healthy relationships that are godly, then we have to be able to do the work within first, right? Again, I'm going to go back to the scriptures that we had spoken about today. The first one, it says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. We also spoke about Galatians 6, verse 1 through 5. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in the other. So I think that we have to think that there's a work to be done within us, guys. There's a work that we have to do on the inside first. And we can't live our lives waiting for somebody else, or waiting for the church to change, waiting for the church board members to change, waiting for the leadership to do something. We need to take it upon ourselves, because truly the relationships happen on the lower level. The relationships happen on an interpersonal level. There's no hierarchy here. Of course, there's the hierarchy that affects the church, but the relationship, it starts with the relationship, and that's what we need to fix first. Eli said, building organic relationships is so dependent that you're as transparent as the person being transparent to you and asking for support from you, right? I agree, because it goes both ways, right? There's one idea of being transparent, to somebody, right? Choosing somebody in the church that you can be transparent with. But is that person gonna be transparent in return? Should it be one way? And if a person doesn't feel safe to be transparent, then it's not something that they're going to practice again. So I think that we should make people feel safe. We should make people understand that, okay, you're telling me that you're struggling with this, right? If we're going to build a relationship that is mutual, a mutual godly friendship, then I should be able to feel safe to speak with you, and you should be able to You should be able to feel safe to speak with me in return. It has to go both ways. I'm gonna read one of the comments that we had pinned before, which is what Sophia had said. She said, what I do at my church is reach out to all the young adults and have programs. So I challenge you guys, as we're going to be ending this live very soon, I challenge each one of you guys to start the work in your churches, in your communities, not just your churches, but even with the person that you have that are friends with you outside of church, right? Be a spiritual vault. If they come to you and speak to you about their issues, what they're struggling with, be able to know that you shouldn't be able to go speak to somebody else about that. If somebody comes and they trust you enough to speak about something that they're dealing with, then keep it in confidence, right? If somebody comes to you and speaks to you about something, you know, try to build a relationship with them. Try to feel as though make them feel your support. Make them feel as though you're present in their time of need. Because again, statistics say that one of the reasons why people are leaving the church is because they feel as though when they're going through crucial transitional periods in their lives or a crucial event or something that's happening in their life, the church does not reach out. They did not receive support, right? And if we want to change our relationships, if we want to change the nature of our relationships, then we have to confront what's within us as well. We have to see what's going on within us that's preventing us from being able to build these strong relationships. So if any of you guys have any last words, you guys can say it now. Even people on this live, you guys can like find one another because we all kind of have like the same idea, right? We all have the same idea and views that we should be building relationships and be able to foster community. And it's weird that we say that because from what I see and from what I know is that a lot of us do have church friends, right? And it's church friends that we maybe hang out with a lot. But are we just hanging out and not doing anything that's going to help that other person? Are we just hanging out to like, you know, be cute friends, to like have our clique, like Eric was saying? That should not be the nature of relationships. That's not the purpose of friendship. That's not the purpose of relationships. And if we want our relationships to serve the purpose that they should have, then these are the things that we should think about when we're having these relationships. These are the things that we should be keeping in mind when we're speaking to our friends, when we're interacting with them. Kenley said, the church today cannot truly help you with all of your problems. We are all humans and we all have problems. Don't expect anything from the church. You must read books and educate yourself, and that can help you to be the source of change. Also, prayer heals relationships. Eric says, statistics also state those who stay in church had or has a mentor in church. Hi, Rita. Yeah, that's true. I've seen statistics say that. So if you guys don't have a mentor in church, get one. Like, it doesn't make sense that we have mentors in every other area of our lives, right? We, in our career, we're trying to seek out mentors, and oftentimes we have multiple ones, right? We have multiple mentors, one that can help us with our careers, one that can help us with our relationships, one that can, you know, we have mentors for every aspect of our lives. Why not find a mentor in church, right? And if this whole idea is that you don't know who to trust, maybe if you find a mentor, that can allow you to create a personal relationship with somebody one-on-one that allows you to be able to feel safe enough to be transparent. Because in our polls, everyone said that they didn't feel safe. They didn't feel comfortable enough to speak about their issues or the sins that they were dealing with. If you find a mentor that you feel is spiritually fit, then that person can be the one that you go to. So we're all sitting here and we're talking about the church this, the church that. But what Eric said is truly important. If you find one person, it only takes one. Nobody's saying that you need 20 people to go tell your business to, or you need 5 friends that you need like that only to know what's going on in your life. If you find one person that can mentor you, that can not only pray with you, but can provide spiritual support, can provide moral support, can provide practical support, right? If you can find somebody like that in the church, that is amazing, because there's no reason why we should be finding mentors and, you know, have mentors for every other aspect of our lives. But when it comes to the church, you know, we have nothing. So I think that's definitely something that we can keep in mind. Patu said, if none of your church friends / members never showed any sign of realness or transparency, how can you know who to talk to? That's a great question. And I also think that we should pray about it. I know that everyone's saying that, praying is not the only answer, but truly, if you pray for discernment, right? If you say, God, like, I know sometimes I've prayed for this and God, like, brings a person to me that I needed in the specific area of my life. If you're praying to God, like, say, God, I feel as though I don't have anybody that I can trust in church right now. I pray that you bring somebody that I know is sent by you. Like, why is it that we're here praying out about, like, our future husbands? Oh, God, send me the right one. Send me the right person for me. Send me a person that is godly. Send me a husband that's godly or a wife that's godly. But we're not asking for godly friends. That's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, we can't be praying for a spouse, but we're not praying for a friend, right? It's still a relationship nonetheless. And I think we often focus too much on romantic relationships and we don't realize the power of friendships. So I think prayer can definitely help. And also sometimes there is risk involved. Sometimes you have to take the chance, Patu, and speak to somebody and make sure that they're not going to tell anybody about it, right? Um, there's a level of risk involved, but that's what vulnerability is. And I think that we all should be able to go out on a limb and at the very least, make that effort. Lovencia said, how does someone reinsert themselves in a church or church circle that has burned them before? That's a great question. If anyone can help answer that as well, how can somebody insert themselves in a church or church circle that has burned them before? But Logan said, what you said that before, you said that, how can somebody insert themselves? Why do they have to reinsert themselves? You know what I mean? There's many churches, there's many communities. You don't necessarily have to reinsert yourself, especially if you don't trust these people for a reason. Of course, you can forgive them, but I know that even in the lessons, the Sabbath school lessons that some people study, not everyone, but although we can forgive that person, we can forgive that group for hurting us. You don't necessarily have to go back. So I think that's one solution that you can think about. But if anybody else has answers to that question, that would be great. Patu said mercy. Stacey said we need to be trustworthy. We need to keep whatever was shared with us to ourselves, not with our moms, our dads, our best friends. That was my biggest problem. That was keeping me from having a true friend in my life, especially us women. We like to call their best friend who like to call their best friend about everything. We need to stop talking about people to our best friends. There is a whole lot of other stuff we can talk about. Mercy. Amen. Um, I think that's important too. You know, and it goes back to the nature of our relationships. Evaluate your friendships. Evaluate these relationships that you're having with people in church. What is the purpose of it? Are you guys just getting together to talk nonsense about sister so and so, or about brother so and so, or about pastor so and so, or about elder so and so? Or are you guys are you guys bonding, right? Creating a bond for the right reasons? Because a lot of people tend to build bonds based off of hurt, based off of who they both dislike, based off of the fact that they both can speak about information relating to somebody else. And I don't think that we should have our relationship based on that. Instead, they should happen organically, and they should have a different purpose. So we're going to be closing out soon. If anybody has any last words, again, I'm just going to reiterate what we learned, what we discussed throughout this. The issues that we targeted was the fact that in the church, there's a lack of transparency. We targeted the fact that the reasons that there may be a lack of transparency is because people feel as though they're going to be judged. People feel as though what's going to be said is not going to be kept personal, it's not going to be kept private. People feel as though there's a hierarchy in the church, that there's, that socioeconomic status affects how transparent people can be because people are looked down upon for their socioeconomic status. We talked about how to respond to somebody being transparent with us, how we can provide accountability and be a proper accountability partner to someone. And we also spoke about judgment, and we also spoke about solutions. We said prayer is one solution. We said creating social events that all of us can come together within the church to be able to meet other friends, to be able to meet other people that we can trust. And if the church is not allowing you to have these social events, then forget them and have your own social events outside of church. Create it. You know what I mean? Other people said another solution is to actually create a relationship, right? Eric was saying that we need to create a relationship and accept the person before we decide to rebuke them, and allow the change, or allow them to get out of the situation by being friends with you. Through the relationship, there's going to be a change that occurs. Reading the Bible together, through the nature of that relationship, God can convict the heart of that person to turn away from their ways. Can we have this program more often? I truly enjoyed the little time I spent on here. This program happens very often. It happens on Friday nights. If you go and follow Real People Real Lives on Facebook, if you follow RPRL Show on Instagram, and follow them on Twitter too. I pinned the comment down there. I can't find it now, but we pinned a comment relating to all our social media handles so that you guys can keep up with when we're having these discussions. If somebody can post it again, I can pin it once more. But you can follow Real People Real Lives on Facebook. We have a Cash App as well for donations. We're trying to reach 1,000 real people on Facebook, so 1,000 likes on Facebook and 400 likes on Instagram. We are all about bringing these conversations to light, bring these conversations to the forefront, not just for us to target the issues, but for us to be able to figure out solutions and what can we do. So it's 11:52. Before I go and close off, let me just read these last comments. So if you guys have any last words, let me know, because I'm going to read this, and then we're going to, have a call to action, and we're going to speak about what we can do in the coming weeks and the coming months to act upon what we spoke about tonight, and then we can close out with a prayer. So let me go to the comments. Kenley said, thank you for having this session. You are welcome. It's not me, it's God doing this. Rose says, I agree. Stefan says, this session was great. I agree. Christina says, solutions to transparency and growing. Listen up, guys. She's giving solutions. Be receptive. Ask questions. Be curious. Pray. Extend our help. Sit down and get to know them more. Check in. Follow up. Genuinely care about the person. Creating social events, and get in the word together. I'm so glad that you basically outlined all the solutions we spoke about. So if y'all want to screenshot that, put it as your screensaver, just so you can remind yourself what you can do to be a great friend, what you can do to be an accountability partner going forward. Sade said, yes, truly enjoy this conversation and hearing the hearts of other young adults. Eric said, we reached 1,000. We reached 1,000, guys. Woo-hoo! Give us some likes for that. We reached our goal tonight, which is amazing. We reached 1,000 on Facebook. So I don't know what the next goal is, but we thank you all for always tuning in. Christina says, yes, Mr. I thank God for using you today to get our gears turning. Amen. So just as we finish out, I just want to challenge you guys. With everything that we spoke about tonight, I don't want what we spoke about to just go through one ear and out the other. I want you guys to truly keep replaying everything that we spoke about tonight. Keep replaying it in your mind over the week when you're interacting with somebody, when somebody comes to you and opens up to you about something. Remember this live, remember what we spoke about, and alter the way that you would have normally reacted and try to do something different. Follow up. Go out on a limb and build a relationship with somebody. Build on a relationship with somebody in your church. Find a mentor within the church, somebody that you can trust, somebody that you can speak about. Sometimes you need to be transparent. Be open about your issues, because there's power in your story. There's power in what you're going through, because so many other people may be experiencing it as well. So before we go, I'm just going to go into a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for allowing us to have this fruitful conversation tonight. I thank you for using me. And I thank you for using every single young person or old person on here for us to be able to speak about the issues that are plaguing the church, and what we can do to fix these issues, and the solutions that we can bring for these problems to be resolved. In this moment, I'm praying that you enter the hearts of each and every person that was on this live today, each and every person that commented, each and every person that joined, and allow them to remember this. Allow them to remember this when they are interacting with everybody else in their church or people outside of their church, Lord. I ask that you place your spirit within them so that they can have the spirit of discernment regarding who to open up to and who not to open up to, Lord. I pray that you allow them to find the power and the transparency and find the value and transparency, for them to find the value in their personal relationships and in their friendships that they can have within the church. I pray that every relationship that we have, Lord, be founded on you, and that you be at the center of each and every one of them, and that you allow us to be great friends to one another. Allow us to be spiritual vaults, Lord, and although we can come to you with anything that we need and anything that we have to ask in any of our issues, Lord, we pray that you bring great friendships into our lives so that we can build up one another, Lord, so that we can sharpen one another, and have deeper relationships in the church. I ask that you grow this ministry, Real People, Real Lives, and I pray that everybody who was touched tonight, that they may be able to take the action and take the initiative to touch somebody else, speak to somebody else about this, and educate somebody else about how they can be a great friend. I ask that you be with us as we either go to church tomorrow or as we go to church on Sunday, Lord, as we go about every one of our activities during the weekend. And I ask that you protect one of our minds, protect each and every one of us as we go to sleep. Guard our minds, and guard our relationship. Protect them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So that's it, guys. Thank you for joining. It was a great, I suppose we spent like about 3 hours speaking. It was a great 3 hours speaking to you guys. I enjoyed this conversation. We have 3 minutes left. So yeah, this is it, guys. Again, follow us on all our social media outlets. RPRL Show on Instagram. I see you guys putting the hearts. Follow us on RPRL Show on Instagram. Real People, Real Lives on Facebook. And the more support you give us, and the more we're able to create discussions like this for you guys. And I challenge you to have these discussions at home as well. Have these discussions with your peers. And in the end, we can have a better church. All right, guys, I wish you all a good night, and thank you for joining.